If you have watched Death by Bunjie, you've seen me shoot deer from tree stands. You've seen me shoot deer out of ground blinds. I have always wanted to shoot a deer from the ground, and finally Bunjie and I get that opportunity. That is this episode of Death by Bunjie. If you haven't already, check out deathbybunjie.com. Join our email list on there. It's free and you can cancel at any time. By the time you see this video, Pennsylvania's 37 Days of Awesome is already over. The Pennsylvania CROSSBOW season is a thing of the past for 2019. This is the last video I'll have for you out of that hunting season, and it's Bunjie and I hunting from the ground over Decoy. Those of you watching Death by Bunjie, you'll recall that I set up a natural blind here in August or September of this year. I started working on it piece by piece. Also put up a really nice mock scrape to hunt over. Put a licking branch up. This won't hurt a bit. Back in 2016, you might recall, I shot my Pennsylvania buck over a mock scrape that we installed. He came in, used the remainder, checked out that mock scrape, and then he was working his antlers on a nearby rub that he had created. And that was the target buck. That was really the biggest buck on the property at the time. I was successful in shooting that deer. Bunjie and I filled our tag with a deer over that mock scrape. Now, when we originally set up that mock scrape, I had a camera on there, and every picture of the deer that I had in the first week of having that camera out there was a picture of the deer looking at the camera. They seemed concerned about that camera. They were coming through that area. They were using that scrape, and I think that's one of the keys to these scrapes is putting them in an area where deer frequent during the day. If you put one of these mock scrapes in a place where deer only travel at night, they're only going to use those mock scrapes at night. Because those deer seemed affected by the camera, and because the following 2 weeks of having that camera out there showed me no pictures whatsoever, I took the camera down. So I figured the only way for me to have activity here, the only way for me to tell if the deer are using this scrape from that point on would be looking at the actual scrape activity. And I was totally surprised by the amount of deer activity over that mock scrape. They were tearing it apart. It got bigger and bigger each time that I went out there to check on it. Now, in the past, I've used different lures and scents to put on the leaves and then on the ground as well. Frankly, this year I didn't need to do that. These branches were put at the right height. I find that those branches, if they're at the right height, the deer are going to create that scrape for you. I did absolutely nothing to the ground other than come back and check on it. The deer did all the rest. That scrape, when I started looking at it by the middle of October, was well worked. And by the end of October, had a lot of activity over it because it had gotten to the point where it was 5 feet across and it was wet. The ground there was moist every time I came in to check it. You can't beat that. You can't ask for any more than that. I did see some deer in the area. There was some movement through there, but I just had no one come in while I was seated there. And I think a big problem for me has been hunting from the ground. Even though I'm tucked in those little hemlock boughs and I created this little makeshift natural blind there to sit in, had a nice comfortable bench so that I could sit comfortably, I still find myself twitching all the time, moving around, and I want to look over here, I want to look over there. And I think that amount of movement is something that deer pick up on if they are coming into the area, if they stop and they're surveying the area before they come into that scrape. I don't doubt in any way that I was discouraging deer at some point during the many times that I sat down there from coming in to that scrape. So I finally bit the bullet here and went and got the ground blind out. I'd already used it up at the 100-year-old apple tree. The apples are gone, so that area is no longer going to produce shots on deer for me. So I picked up that blind, went down there, and I set it up 25 yards from that scrape. I figured if I moved it back to the 25-yard line, that would probably put the deer a little more comfortable, maybe salvage some kind of opportunity there. And at least sitting in a blind, they would be less likely to know that I was there. Unfortunately, putting up a blind practically the same day, not the best hunting strategy. It is what it is. The only animals that I had come within shooting distance from that blind were turkeys. One morning, I'm seated down there, sitting there, minding my own business, and off in the distance, I see some movement. I'm fiddling around with a new camera, the same camera that you're watching this video on. I'm trying to try out different video cameras and thinking about upgrading to 4K for Death by Bungie. We'll see how that goes. But while I'm sitting there off in the distance, I'm trying to get them on film with this new camera, fiddling around with focus, fiddling around with the zoom features, all of that. Before I know it, there is a beautiful gobbler right in front of me at the 15-yard line. He is barely across the creek. He's not even over at the scrape. He's actually walking this side of the scrape. And by the time I'm able to finagle things, I finally give up on the camera, hoping to get a shot at this turkey. I pull off to my left. I'm making sure that the left limb of the crossbow is not going to strike the blind, leaning across like this. Took my shot, and sure enough, I completely shot over the back of that gobbler. Wouldn't you know it, first time I get a crack at a gobbler with Bungie and we blow it. We've hunted turkey seasons year after year and had no opportunities. I finally get that shot opportunity and I let Bungie down. It is what it is. But we are not done with our 37 days of awesome. No, we are not done with our Pennsylvania crossbow season. We're not done with our efforts of hunting from the ground. In my experience, these mock scrapes, really hot in the second half of October here in northeastern Pennsylvania, but the beginning of November, things sort of shift a little bit away from these scrapes. They become less valuable. The deer aren't fighting, the bucks aren't fighting and trying to become dominant, check out the other bucks in the area quite as much. From November 1st to November 15th or so, the first 2 weeks of November, which is basically the last 2 weeks of our Pennsylvania crossbow season, I have found that using decoys at that time and maybe a little bit of calling can really entice bucks to come in and check out the area. It's always been a dream of mine to drag Buckley down into the woods. Buckley is the deer decoy that I have. That's just not much of a name, I know, but it's what Genevieve and I came up with, my daughter and I came up with. But Buckley has those antlers. You take those antlers off, and he makes a pretty nice doe decoy. We call him Dolly when he's a doe. Again, the names, I've used this doe decoy, the buck decoy in the past, set him up. I called in a buck with a kind of an interesting rack a year or two ago. That buck had an interesting set of antlers there, and it'd make a very interesting mount for the wall, a European mount of some sort. But I had bigger deer on cameras that year, so I chose to pass on that deer. Passing on deer is something you've seen me do here on Death by Bungie. I do not shoot every deer that walks in front of me, but I certainly have no objection to doing that either if the circumstances are right. At home, I usually have cameras out. I usually have a pretty good idea, pretty good inventory of the bucks that are running around. And I usually save my tag for the bigger deer if that's going to be an opportunity. But that opportunity does not present itself every year. This year, I've had a lack of cameras because every time that I had used those cameras, I got discouraged by the pictures I was getting. I was not getting those deer to come back once the camera was in place. So me and Bungie and Buckley, as Dolly, head into the woods and we set up in the upper hardwood lot. We set up with our back tucked into a nice little hemlock tree, or at least Bungie and I are set up that way, tucked back into a little collection of hemlocks so we can have a little bit of breakup, a little bit of camouflage, natural camouflage, if you will. And we set Dolly up there, the decoy, out in front of me at the 20-yard line. Now, I might not be doing this right. I experiment with it a little each time, change things a little bit this time, change things a little that time. But with a doe decoy, I'm thinking that the most important feature on that decoy is the rear end, the tail. And the tail on this decoy is kind of nice because it just sort of hangs there, but it flaps a little bit in the breeze. So when there's a little bit of a breeze, it moves a little bit. A little bit of extra realism. I did not use any lures, no scents, nothing like that. I don't do that. In fact, this decoy smells like the tractor shed, if you know what I mean, because that is where we store it. But I set it up that morning with its rear end facing me, hoping that any buck that would come by to check that out would give me a broadside quartering away shot as he comes in to investigate that. Now this decoy's at the 20-yard line, and that means any deer that comes in is going to be 20 or under, most likely, because they're probably going to come in on that side. I felt pretty confident about that for two reasons. I'm tucked into these little hemlocks, got a little bit of breakup this way, but in addition to that, I've also got the ozonics machine on over my head. There's a bedding area behind me. There's a bedding area downwind from me. And I know that there are does and bucks bedded in that area off on the neighbors. Putting a lot of faith in this ozonics machine. Hopefully that will help confuse the deer, camouflage my scent a little bit, if you know what I mean. We sat there for a few hours. It's cold. It's November. An hour or so before dusk, I hear leaves off to my right, over my right shoulder. I fight every temptation of turning my head. I'm waiting for whatever is there to come out and show itself in front of me and focus on that decoy. It's moving pretty quick, and I realize pretty quick as I look out of the corner of my eye, it's a doe moving really fast to my right, and she goes all the way around my field cam, my other camera that's set up, all the way around the decoy, out across the hardwood flats, turns left, and starts heading up the hill, going across the hill toward the neighbor's property. I hear more footsteps, more leaves rustling, and right on her tail is a young buck. She kept going, she booked, and she's going right up over the hill onto the neighbor's property. The buck, the minute he saw that decoy, he stopped dead in his tracks immediately. Turns left, a hard left turn, and heads straight for that decoy. He lost all interest and forgot completely about the deer that he was chasing and went straight to the decoy. Can you believe that? He's a little bit spooked by the lack of movement of this deer. It's just standing there, and it's actually leaning a little bit, if you notice that. But he's still curious about it, and he's hanging around.
I'm not that kind of girl. I'm not that kind of girl. I won't play your games like the other teams, 'cause I'm not that kind of girl. Ow!
He's frisky, but when he finally gets done with that decoy, he's giving me a hard quartering away shot. Bunjie and I, we're gonna take that shot. Well, that was awesome. Six point. Make a great European mount. Genevieve will love it. All kinds of venison this year. Deer number 7 on the year. All hail Bunjie. How great is that? Buckley didn't know what to make of this situation, and I thought, man, I at least got to lift up the crossbow here, lift Bunjie up to make sure I've got some footage of this. And then when I'm looking through the scope, I see he's a legal buck. He's got 3 points on one side. That's legal here in this part of Pennsylvania. And I took a hard quartering away shot. He didn't even know I was here. That's 20 yards on the nose. The decoy's at 20 yards. I was thinking I'd probably end up with a 15-yard shot. That's what I was thinking, because I was expecting the deer to be 5 yards this side of it, not to get that close to that decoy. He got right on top of her, and I took a hard quartering away shot right through the liver, right into the lungs. He didn't go 30 yards. He didn't go 20 yards. He's laying right over there. Perfect shot. Right through the liver. Got that buck. Look at that guy. I'm going to go over there and retrieve the arrow. Incidentally, that's the arrow that I personally refletched earlier this year. I refletched that arrow. How cool is that? Figured out how to do that this year, so I didn't have to take them to a shop. So I have officially used an arrow that I refletched. Hopefully that arrow is still intact. He took off with it. When you're shooting at a hard quartering away angle like that, you are probably going to have the deer carry that arrow off into the distance with him, because that's an awful lot to ask from this older, slower crossbow. Don't pay no mind, Bunjie. But I got to tell you, that pretty much wraps up Pennsylvania for me. I don't know if you can see this, but look at this crossbow. Do you see this? Look how great this crossbow is. I hope you are having as much fun with your crossbow seasons as Bunjie and I are having. Mwah! Let's go look at that buck. Here's the buck. Got Bunjie here. Oh, hopefully you can see this whole thing. What an exciting little afternoon. This is a cute little buck. He will look very nice. He's been rubbing good. Antler's got a little bit of wear and tear on there, where he's been working the hemlocks probably. But nice little buck. I will clean him up, take him upstairs. We'll get the head off to the taxidermist, do a nice European mount. Genevieve really likes that stuff, so hopefully she gets a kick out of this. He is going to look great. I just gotta tell you, I wasn't even going to come out today. Can you believe that? I took yesterday off, hunted all day yesterday, sat in a blind, trying out a new video camera, and now I'm back to the DSLR. That really suits me. I guess I didn't get this on the DSLR, but I did get this on the Tacticams, and I've got enough video to tell a story. Well, I didn't let Bunjie down today. We did a good job. We got this nice buck. Got a couple pictures of him. Really don't have much for bucks on this property this year. Not an awful lot on the cameras. But I'll tell you, I am tickled pink to use my Pennsylvania buck tag on this beautiful fella here. He is a good, clean, healthy looking deer. Well, maybe not healthy, but he will clean up nice. I'll get him gutted. I'll get him dragged out of here. All hail Bunjie!
Well, thank you so much for watching this episode of Death by Bunjie. I hope you got as much enjoyment out of this hunt as I did, and as much enjoyment as Bunjie did. I hope you got more enjoyment out of this hunt than Buckley did. I really do appreciate your support. I hope that your crossbow season has been as promising and as rewarding as my crossbow season has been. Remember to check out deathbybunjie.com and sign up for that mailing list. Again, it's free, and you can cancel your subscription to that mailing list at any time. I really do appreciate your support, and until next time, all hail Bunjie!
The second state is number one in my book.
Let's sit here like this. Let this focus on me. Get the exposure right. I think we're a third here in 4K. We'll see what that does. Great, we got the furnace run. That's lovely. Maybe the water heater will run next. That'll be great.
Hopefully you can hear me okay. Hopefully you can see me, and you can't. How's that? How's that? Maybe turn him a little bit. You like that better, do you? There you go. Probably. How's that look? Looks like you got me. Well, hopefully you can see me good. Let's get the guy where you can see him